The background material in this video can be viewed at thewaythetruthandthelife.net. More specific references will be given in the notes.
As parents, when we have children, we have to be really careful what we do. Because it's spirit to spirit, even when your kids, when you're messing around, committing sin, it's going to be passed on to your children whether you like it or not, nor to not believe it or not. When God said don't sin, he really meant it. Believe me, he meant that. All who sin are slaves.
Have you cared for a mate and made a home? Have you had children and cared about the community that they grow into? Have you had children that grew up and you learned to care about the world of work and war that they grow into, or the education system that they're subject to? Have you felt the pain of things being degraded in your lifetime? Then you will very much find in Jesse a man who is able to care about family, home, community, and others, and shares your concern over the corrupt and degrading state that is happening in our society today.
Ever notice how you come across somebody once in a while you shouldn't have messed with? That's me.
I am not an African American.
You're Oreo cookie, white in the inside and black on the outside.
I don't have an afro, I have an Amerifro.
Talking that idiotic stuff you talk about, I will slap you.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Black at the ace of spades, but 100% American.
Heard around the world by everybody and their mama. The Jesse Lee Peterson Radio Show.
Uniting the races with truth instead of dividing them with lies. We're also rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. I am Jesse Lee Peterson. Thank you so much for being with me. Welcome back. Pastor Horn, let's go to some calls here. We have a caller from Russia, Don. Don, good morning, sir. Welcome to the show. You're on with Pastor Horn.
Well, I'm glad to the opportunity to be on. I try to home in what I have on my mind that might be relevant. I enjoyed hearing your discussion.
Thank you.
But two things come to mind in a hurry. Like in Europe, the churches are virtually empty, and it's really women's liberation. Women use the established churches to have a power tool against their husbands, and they don't need them anymore. They just call the police and have them thrown out.
Interesting.
Or whatever, or don't even have one.
What do you say about that, Pastor Horn?
What do you say about that? I think the caller is right, and hopefully, again, it'd be easy to be pessimistic about the church in America, and to think about all the empty churches in Europe, and know that that's where, and believe that's where we're headed. But for the time being, I'm going to choose to remain optimistic and believe that God and His power is going to turn this thing around in America.
On my second call in to Jesse, I recorded it on YouTube as my video number 254, and part of the title was "The Sins of the Fathers Will Be Visited on the Children to the Third and Fourth Generation." That's a quote from the Bible. The interpretation of this has changed in my mind. When I first read it, I thought, well, after 3 generations, the sins of the fathers are forgotten. But what I have now come to the conclusion is that a culture is destroyed in 3 or 4 generations of the fathers giving up the ability to be responsible for their home, giving up control to the women. Whether it's the ownership of property or the vote, I could go into that. And it takes someone that is a practicing father to raise sons to be able to be fathers. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's not a genetic one. Maternal behavior is much more genetic. We'll get into that another time. But with women's liberation and the women's liberation movement, the political power of it is tremendous, and they work together with all other minorities, homosexuals, transvestites, and mental patients' rights, black rights, and any rights. They'll work for the minority. They'll work for welfare rights, for free handouts. Now, I'm not against rights at all. I've confronted the abuses of the medical and psychiatric professions. It was the doctors that were behind the Young Turks that murdered all those Armenians. That movement was largely out of medical universities that went into the military. But the reality is, in Hitler and Nazi Germany learned from them that Germany was in the war with Turkey, on Turkey's side, when they were exterminating the Christians. But the Holocaust against the Armenians. But that's where the Germans learned this behavior. It was the doctors that first practiced it in Germany, that killing all their psychiatric patients and disabled patients. The death chambers were set up by doctors. At any rate, that's a whole another thing that needs to be looked into. But here, that the sins of the fathers are visited on the children. In 3 generations or so, it's a dead culture. That's what's happened in Europe. There's a reason, and another video we can get into. There's great similarities between the black community in America and the Russian community. It's not so obvious to the casual observer because the black and white differentiation seems to stick out in people's mind, but it really has nothing to do with race. And I'll get into that. I want to bring it up to Jesse, and then I'll detail it more after that. But here, the breakdown of the worldly churches. Not that all were just using the churches, but I discovered I was brokenhearted by what happened in my family. I had worked for 10 years to try and build a family, and there was adultery between in-laws that destroyed the family get-togethers and broke my heart. And I had been single for 10 years, and I just, with all that pain, I wanted to have a helpmate. We shouldn't go through the pain with our children alone. That isn't the way God meant it. But I went on the internet looking for a Christian wife, and I found many. Almost all of them were evangelicals that their husbands had divorced them. And what I discovered in communicating with them was that God served them. They didn't serve God. And later I put 2 and 2 together to get 4, that they had used the church as a power tool against their husbands. Their husbands just got sick of it and walked off in many cases. Not all, of course. So, at any rate, these worldly churches, starting with the Catholic Church, dominated by women, even to the point of raising women to where in Christ's church, a saint is a believer. We're all saints if we are followers of Christ and invite His Spirit, His outlook into our life, and convert our culture into His culture, being born again. So I see this as a fulfillment to Revelations, talking about the end of a culture, the end of the Christian culture in this world. We'll get into that more, but I just going to have the most relevant parts of Revelations read to you. And I'll go on to the second question, and Jesse talks to me again, and we'll finish up with that other.
Revelations 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Revelations 17:4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Revelations 17:5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Revelations 17:6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Revelations 17:7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carried her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Revelations 17:8. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Revelations 17:9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth.
Don, did you have another question or comment?
Yeah, well, I come from a background of home church with the ministers that went 2 by 2, and they're having a hard time, and it's hard to find good ministers today. But if you think about it, the farm family, the children need love. Let me back up a step further. My uncle was a mink rancher. Anybody that's involved in animal husbandry will tell you, number one, you have to choose the mothers well. They need to be able to care for their babies. And women aren't doing that today, and the children aren't able to grow in love. I think that's the predestination Paul talked about, that some are predestined because their parents cared enough to make sure they were with them and gave them a mammalian nursing bond. That's my thought. It's the family, and the children aren't being raised to be able to have God in their soul. They can't care about. They're lucky if they can care about their toys, or
yeah. Pastor Horn, Don make a very interesting point here. For the last 22 years, I've been running a nonprofit organization called Bond, and we have been rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. I believe in that spiritual order of God and Christ, Christ and man, man over woman, woman over children. That order has been broken, and I saw it happen in the black family first, and the destruction that came after that has been amazing to me. It is now happening in the white families and other families. Is it possible, Pastor Horn, to turn things around without turning that family around?
No, I don't think it's possible to turn things around without going to, the root of the problem.
Yeah.
and that I think most people believe that whether you're talking about the church or whether you're talking about education. I mean, talk about education in Louisiana. There's a lot of discussion right now about education reform, and a very conservative governor that's doing all that he can do. But government cannot change the educational system with any amount of programs. They are fighting an uphill battle because of the family. And we have the greatest school teachers in the world, greatest schools, but if it's not being reinforced at home, there is little reason to think that things are going to change.
That's right. Thank you, Don. I appreciate your call.
This has been the Jesse Lee Peterson Show, produced by Bond, Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. Views expressed by guests and callers on today's program may not necessarily represent the views of the station. For more information, call 1-800-411-BOND. That's 1-800-411-BOND. Or visit our website at bondinfo.org.
The background material in this video can be viewed at thewaythetruthandthelife.net. More specific references will be given in the notes.